Hello, everybody. On today's episode, on the What If Factor, we are going to be discussing what would happen if Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin teamed up in World War II. What would happen if history had unfolded differently? What if the most infamous figures of World War II, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, had decided to put aside their deep, indulgent differences and formed an alliance? How would this dramatic shift in power have changed the course of history? In this video, we explore an alternative reality where the Nazis and the Soviet Union set aside their... If I can talk, that would be great. Back to the video. And enmity and join forces. Would this partnership have defeated the Allies, or would it have created a new set of problems for both leaders? Let's dive into this what if scenario. In 1939, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed, a non-aggression agreement between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. This pact allowed Hitler to invade Poland without fear of Soviet Union, and it gained Stalin a free hand in the Baltic states and parts of Finland. But this was never a true alliance. It was more of a convenience for both dictators. But imagine for a moment that this temporary pact was something more permanent. What if they built a full alliance, not just for a few years, but for the entire war? The first thing that you have to know is how Hitler and Stalin might have divided Poland. In our timeline, they split the country down the middle. But in this alternative scenario, they might have coordinated the force to launch a more synchronized attack. Both armies working together could have swept through Poland faster and with far greater efficiency. Now with Poland crushed, both militaries might have looked to expand their influence further. Nazi Germany pushing west and the Soviet Union expanding south and east. Now imagine the consequences for Britain. In real history, Britain was fighting Germany on the Western Front, while the Soviets fought Germany on the Eastern Front. But what if the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany both pushed at Britain? One from the East and one from the West. The Blitz might have been even more effectful. And Britain's chance of survival would be very, very slim. Especially if Stalin had helped fund and equip the Nazis with Soviet resources like oil and steel and manpower. The Battle of Britain might have been over in a matter of weeks instead of months. Would Britain have been forced to surrender, or could they have held out against both dictatorships? Of course, the real turning point of World War II came with Hitler's invasion on the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. But if Stalin and Hitler were allies, there would be no Barbarossa. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I probably am. The resources of the Soviet Union, practically its vast oil reserves, or partially practically his vast oil reserves, could have been used to fuel Nazi Germany's machines, giving Germany the ability to strike anywhere in Europe without worrying about supplies. The alliance would have turned the entire Eastern Front into a cooperative effort. The Soviets might have pushed into Eastern Europe, the Balkans, or even further into Asia, while the Nazis focused on conquering Western Europe. But remember, the alliance would have been free from tension. Despite the mutual interest, Nazis were deeply anti-communist. Stalin's paranoia, paranoia would have likely made it difficult for both leaders to trust each other completely. What about the impact on the Allies? A world at war. For the Allies, the new power dynamic would have been catastrophic. It would have been just horrible, to be completely honest, because the United States might have been forced to enter the war earlier. But fighting both the Nazi and Soviets could have stretched American resources thin. Could Britain and the U.S. have fought a war on two fronts? Could the Allies have maintained the morale knowing they were up against not just facing, but communists as well? Fascists and communists? I said facing, I meant not just fascists. My bad. If Hitler and Stalin had emerged victorious, the post-war would have looked drastically different. A divided Europe might have seen both Nazi and Soviet influences stretch from Paris to Moscow. Would the two dictators have continued to exist peacefully after the war, or would they inherit contradictions between fascism and communism? That's a hard word to say. Communism have led to an eventual split, creating a Cold War-like scenario even earlier. Perhaps the world would have found itself a never-ending state of global tension and conflict. So, in conclusion, while it's impossible to say exactly what would have happened if Hitler and Stalin had formed a lasting alliance, we can be sure that the world would have been a very different place. The fight for freedom and democracy might have been crushed under the weight of two brutal regimes. But perhaps the most important lesson here is the fragile history. Small decisions like a single diplomatic pact or an unexpected alliance can change the entire trajectory of the world. In the end, history teaches us that even the most unlikely partnerships have been profound impacts sometimes, for the better, but often for worse. What do you think? How would the world have changed if Hitler and Stalin had become allies? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more alternative history scenarios and what ifs. That's all for today, folks. See you in the next one.